and for a few days. And Alcatraz is a little island in California. It's where the big prison is. And they took that over, claiming that that was their land and that they needed it. They wanted it back. Other movements, many people, again, after the Civil Rights Movement, the Civil Rights Movement is going to trigger, it's going to be the catalyst that starts other movements. Japanese Americans, if you guys remember, during World War II, Japanese Americans were actually interned because the president had them interned, saying that they were a threat to America. And by the 1960s and the 1970s, these people started to fight for compensation. They believed that they needed to be duly compensated. A lot of their land, a lot of their homes, their businesses actually was taken away from them when they were interned, and when they came back, they never got their things back. So they believed that they needed to be duly compensated for those things. And they eventually were, President Reagan actually signed a proclamation that they were given reparations for a lot of the things that was taken from them and not given back when they came back from internment. Consumers, Ralph Nader wrote a book called Safe at Any Speed. And in this book, as I told you guys a few weeks ago, in this book, he talked about how cars were just really unsafe. Back then, there was no seatbelts. There was really no real safety features that cars had to have to get on the road. The tires were not... they didn't have any safety inspections or anything for that. And so Ralph Nader leads a consumer-driven protest, pretty much, to try to get our cars to be safer and for there to be a national safety standards for our cars. Eunice Kennedy, who was the sister of John F. Kennedy and Robert Kennedy. The Kennedys actually had a sister who, Rose Kennedy, she had a mental disability. When she was young, she was actually lobotomized, because back in the day, that's what they did up to people who had mental disabilities. And so she was handicapped for her entire life, especially after the lobotomy. And her sister, Eunice Kennedy, she starts the Special Olympics as a forum so that people could see that people with mental disabilities and physical disabilities, that they were just like us, and that they were people too, and that they needed an avenue where they could go so that they could just have fun, just like the rest of us. And the environmental movement will be the last movement that we've talked about. We have already discussed the anti-war movement, but your quiz this Friday, remember you have a quiz, it's on the board. Your quiz this Friday will include things from the anti-war movement, so please make sure that you do study over those notes. But the last movement that I'm going to talk about in these notes will be the environmental movement. The environmental movement, as we discussed last week, starts because of Rachel Carson's Silent Spring. Silent Spring was a book that told about the bad effect that pesticides that farmers put on their vegetables, that those pesticides ended up in our water table. And she told about the dangerous effects that these pesticides could have on us when we drank this water. So she writes this book. People start to become aware of the environment. And then a river in the Northeast catches on fire. And people became alarmed that that could happen. Can you guys think of a river catching on fire? This river actually shows the impact of pollution, especially in the Northeast. And eventually we decide that we want to do something about that. So Earth Day is created. And after Earth Day is created, President Nixon, a Republican, starts many acts, and he starts the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, which is supposed to supervise pollution. I don't know if you guys actually know, but the EPA sets pollution standards. So let's say Duke Energy, coal ash. They had a coal ash bill a couple of years ago. The EPA tells them that they have to clean this up. Companies are able to pollute The EPA just sets standards about how much they can pollute. You can actually put pollution in our rivers. The EPA just sets the standards on how much pollution can go in the rivers. They set the standards for pollution from your cars. About 40 years ago, in LA was like China. If you guys just Google or YouTube China, and some days people have to wear masks. You can't see because the smog is so bad. LA was like that about 40 years ago, before the EPA set standards on automobiles and other pollution. And today, those you can actually see in LA. A lot of times you couldn't see before. 3 other acts were also created by the Nixon administration to try to solve pollution. You had the Clean Water Act, the Clean Air Act, and another act that was about the water, because back in the 70s, acid rain was a very big problem. And if you don't know what acid rain is, it would start raining, and the rain was so filled with soot and other materials that the rain would actually kill the plants that it was falling on. And it's not a good thing. So with all of these acts to try to clean the air and the water, acid rain has actually become a thing of the past. There still is some acid rain, but it's not like it was in the late 70s. Love Canal. Love Canal was a river in Philadelphia, I believe. It's in Pennsylvania. Or New York. I forget. But this river is one of the most contaminated rivers in the United States. It's actually still on the endangered rivers list. It had barrels, just disgusting place, and people actually got their water from these rivers. And these rivers actually test to be almost toxic. And when these rivers were tested and we saw how polluted a lot of our rivers were, Congress is going to start something called the Superfund. And the Superfund is still active today because a lot of rivers are actually still on the endangered rivers list. And Superfund is money, millions of dollars that Congress has set aside to make sure that rivers are cleaned up. A lot of the companies who dump things into these rivers, they make those companies clean it up. But for the most part, this is from years and years and years of pollution, and this money helps to clean those rivers up. Another scare, probably one of the biggest scares in American history, had to do with actually nuclear energy. 3 Mile Island. 3 Mile Island was a nuclear power plant in the Northeast, and it went in meltdown almost. It did go in meltdown, and people were evacuated. They thought that the plant was actually going to explode. I guess you guys remember Fukushima a few years ago. They actually went into meltdown, and the nuclear power plant actually did explode pretty much. And they are still dealing with that stuff today. You get radiation and all of that thing. It's just like if an atomic bomb would fall. It's the same kind of thing, and we use this nuclear energy. We use uranium, plutonium, all that stuff in these nuclear power plants for energy. And many people, when the meltdown occurred and we thought it was going to blow up, many people started to advocate against the use of nuclear energy. Nuclear energy production, use of nuclear energy actually went down. Today it's actually gone up. Nuclear energy is a lot cleaner than a lot of the other energy we use, especially coal. Coal is very, very dirty, and it really harms the atmosphere. Nuclear energy is good energy if we don't have nuclear power plants everywhere, and if we are safe with it. When Nixon leaves the White House, Carter, Ford, they still are more environmental. But when Reagan enters the White House, Reagan is actually going to take away a lot of these regulations that Nixon signed into law that regulated the environment. So as the 80s come, then a lot of people are going to hate the regulations that the EPA has made, and Reagan will reverse some of those. And those are all the notes. Again, if you have any questions about any of these notes, please just send me a remind or send me a message on the classroom, or just ask me when you come back to class. Maybe we'll do this again so that we can do more things in class and you could get your notes this way. All right, guys, have a good one.